I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Oh, man.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
Evelyn and Bobby's women-led intimates company creates beautiful, purposeful products to make women's lives better. They've created the best underwear ever, combining unique softness with smooth, flat seams that offer a fit so comfortable you'll forget you're wearing them. Evelyn and Bobby come in 3 silhouettes and one size that fits many, with 4-way stretch that moves with you. Visit evelynbobby.com and use code CRIME to get a free pair of underwear with any purchase. That's a $28 value, only when you use the code CRIME at evelynbobby.com.
Support for this podcast comes from Park Row Books, publisher of Under My Skin by New York Times bestselling author Lisa Unger. Under My Skin is an addictive psychological thriller about a woman on the hunt for her husband's killer. Poppy is determined to unravel the mystery around her husband's death, but can she handle the truth about what really happened? Listen to the audiobook for Under My Skin today.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the podcast about serial, true crime, pop culture. And this week in Serial Episode 5, Sarah Koenig brings us inside the prosecutor's office for a peek at how plea bargains are driving the justice system. And then you and 8 of your friends will hear our review of The Dream, a podcast about the world of multi-level marketing. Joining me to get that done and a whole lot more is my real-life husband, true crime co-author, and favorite salesperson under me, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
I just got to get 4 more of my friends, Rebecca, and I'll be caught up.
At least 4.
Well, they have friends, too.
Also with us is journalist, true crime author, former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, and gigantic mushroom aficionado, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello. Yeah. Tune in on social media next week to learn about my encounter with Moby, the 9-pound giant puffball mushroom.
My God.
Can't wait.
You can go behind the scenes.
And finally, our captain of woke cynicism, the brilliant author behind the noir novels known as the City Trilogy, and our very own Patreon book club podcast wrangler, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
Now, Toby, our very handsome line producer, Henry Lavoie, promises me that our book club podcast will be out by the time this episode drops. So for those of our listeners who are not yet on Patreon at the $5 a month level so they can get the Toby Balls Deep Dive Book Club podcast, what is on tap that will be in their feeds this week?
I am talking with Sarah D. Bunting and Julian Gross about The Monster of Florence by Douglas Preston. It's a pretty interesting book about a serial killer in Italy in the 60s through 80s and like this sort of crazy investigation that they do. And then things get really bizarre.
If there's one thing we've established on this podcast is the competency of the Italian justice system.
That's right.
It's the same guy from the Amanda Knox thing.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
That guy that was so
he's-
strange.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, you said
He's
the
just as
word.
insane in this
the
one.
trolls are going to come now.
When I mentioned The Monster of Florence, they swarmed.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
It's like with Voldemort, like when you press the wand to the tattoo, the Death Eaters come.
Yeah.
It's like, boom.
It's sort of like when you say anything about that dude Mike Bodette from Sword and Scale on social media.
Oh, Jesus.
Like a million accounts that I'm
Oh, my
100%
gosh.
sure Mike Bodette is running. Come after you. It's pretty great.
All right.
Now, Kevin, a real quick item in the true crime podcast update realm. The oral arguments in Anand Syed's appeal have been scheduled for November, right?
I guess.
All right, so we'll be looking out for that and covering it on this podcast.
That is true. I think it's with the Thursday, the 29th?
It's the Thursday after Thanksgiving.
Thursday after Thanksgiving. Okay.
So stay tuned, listeners, for a Serial Season 1 update from the Anand Syed appeal.
Maybe I should go down and take notes.
Maybe you should. You could stay with Rabia.
Oh, I don't think I want to be anywhere near Rabia for the week before or after that. She'll be in training. She's going to be... You think that guy on the bus was shadow boxing? Imagine Rabia before that.
All right. Well, shall we get into it this week?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial. One courthouse told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig.
In Serial Season 3, Episode 5, Pleas Baby Pleas, Sarah Koenig brings us inside the prosecutor's office and a day in the life of Brian Radigan. He was the prosecutor who jailed and ultimately released Dave Vaughn in the infant shooting that we heard about in Episode 4. Among the cases Sarah is privy to include that of an elderly man who shot someone, possibly in self-defense.
Brian explained to me that this case was unusual for them because the entire episode was recorded by security cameras on the bus.
This is one of those rare cases where you see the whole story. 90% of our cases, we're not watching them unfold.
This episode gives us a view of what it's like to be one of too few prosecutors in a system with too many felonies to prosecute, with some decisions made for justice, some for expediency, and some because it seems just like a really easy thing to do because a defense attorney may not be pushing back so hard.
Isn't that expedient?
It's expedient of a sort, I guess.
All right.
All right. Now, Laura, I have a question for you. As somebody who's worked inside defense teams, Sarah Koenig makes a statement, and she says that defense attorneys often say they'd rather have a tough judge than a tough prosecutor. I'd love your thoughts on the idea of that. Have you ever been in cases where you've come up against prosecutors that you would just rather never have to face in court?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't be facing them. But yes, I that's definitely something when you're involved in the system from the inside and you get to know the personalities of certain prosecutors and, some that are more reasonable. And then there are some that are absolutely not reasonable. And the prosecutor is ultimately the person that's going to make the recommendation to the judge. So later when we hear Brian saying, well, I don't really have any power. I mean, that's kind of a crock because I think that judges often rely on the discretion of prosecutors and think that they're familiar with the cases. So if you have a reasonable person that's going to maybe work with you on something, I think the judge might be more inclined to accept that. But if you have a prosecutor who's not going to bend at all, they're going to recommend to the judge something that you may not agree with, and the judge is probably going to go along with it. So I definitely can see where she was coming from with that.
Now, Kevin, there is a very long soliloquy near the beginning of the episode of this podcast where Sarah, it's like a 5-minute bit of tape where they actually use like 2 or 3 different pieces of music. That's how I knew how long it was. Describing sort of the charging system, how prosecutors work, how much discretion they have. It was efficient, and I know that. But do you think that today, in 2018, and granted, I know that not every listener of Serial has listened to every podcast that we have listened to, but when we're in a landscape of podcasts like In the Dark and Accused, and even Serial Season 1 and Undisclosed and all the stories that have come out around that, don't we know at this point how much discretion prosecutors actually have? I mean, did you learn anything in this part of the episode is what I guess I'm asking you.
Well, I the statistics I thought about, like when she described like how we got here, I thought was interesting. The 1960s versus today, and sort of what I think we know what the state of play is right now. So the path of how we got here, and then the idea of just the sheer number of cases that they deal with, and
was it 3 million from 34,000 prosecutors or something like that?
Yeah, and so you. It certainly backs up the idea. It sort of puts 2 things together that we kind of know, which is where do all these like this assembly line plea bargain stuff come from? It's because they have to move this stuff along.
Yeah.
We build larger police forces and we build bigger jails. But the thing we don't build are bigger courthouses with more judges and more prosecutors so that you can provide a speedy trial and an adequate trial to more defendants.
Right.
So there isn't necessarily the motivation always to just plea it out on both sides because there are 20 more cases you got to deal with on the same day.
Toby, did you learn anything from this portion of the podcast?
It's that we like to put people in jail a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's seriously, if it's really 3 million cases, how many people are in our country? That's like a substantial percentage of our population.
It's like 1%, right? It's like 300 million or something like that?
Yeah, a little bit less. And then I guess I didn't learn this, but what I came away thinking is we just make a crap load of stuff illegal and are willing to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think things like the war on drugs, it's so sort of wrong-headed because it creates this situation where stuff that you really do need to police and take care of and where people probably should be incarcerated, it's not lost in as much as you can't pay as much attention to it as you probably should. So you get the situation where you're just pleading and pleading and pleading, and they don't talk about the percentages, but there's got to be a fair percentage of that. It's just got to be, minor drug possession, right? Because that's what a lot of the arrests are.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like that she pointed out, which isn't news, but I like anytime this gets pointed out in one of these stories, is the perception jurors have when someone comes into court with a pile of charges on them, the idea that, well, they had to have done something, otherwise there wouldn't be 12 charges. Mm-hmm. Not just jurors, but grand jurors or, different people who come in contact with defendants. It's very similar to the perception that there is when someone doesn't get bail or can't pay their bail and they come to court wearing the jail jumpsuit rather than wearing street clothes. You figure, oh, this person's in jail, they must have done something. It's sort of like that easy leap to make. And I do appreciate that having been pointed out. Now, I want to talk about the protagonist of this episode, Brian Radigan, maybe the only nice-seeming prosecutor in the history of true crime podcasts. He's the prosecutor assigned to the case of the shooting of Avielle Wakefield, that 5-month-old baby we heard about in episode 4. First, Sarah picks at the thread of why Brian's case against Davon Holmes fell apart. Laura, if I know you, I know that you, like me, are probably dying to know more about that anonymous taped phone call he talks about that was key to that case falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually, I was like, listening to it, it was like somebody who cares about Davon and a mystery man. I'm like, mystery man? Who's the mystery man? And then we heard, I think that the mystery man got arrested and was in custody.
Oh, for the carjacking, yes.
Yeah,
right,
and I'm like, okay, well, now we know who the mystery man is. I want some more details. So, yes, I was curious about that, and I was curious, how did they record this conversation? Was this somebody who secretly recorded something on their cell phone? Because there was some talk about whether it was authentic, and they decided it was authentic.
And it just came to them.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
It was interesting. I do want to point out one really great scene around this point of the podcast. It's about the 16-minute mark I have in my notes. Reminiscent of the first episode of this season, that really excellent open where Sarah sets the scene with this prosecutor. Brian Radigan describes his office and sort of describes who he is as a character.
Brian works in the major trial unit, homicides mostly. In his office, he's got a mini fridge and a neatish desk and a window with the blinds drawn that overlooks Lake Erie. It's nothing fancy by a long shot. Case files and boxes of evidence are piled around. Complaining chair. Brian looks sharp, though. He wears a suit every day. He never knows when he might be pulled into a courtroom. But the way his beard stubble scrapes against his collar, you understand he's enduring the costume, not enjoying it. He doesn't appear to revel in his power. He favors the aw shucks variety of dominance. From what I can tell, Brian is universally respected in the Justice Center. He's forthright, he has compassion, he can take a joke. He's 38, married, 2 little kids. A regular, amiable guy.
Now, the second part of our sort of exploration of prosecution with Brian is a case in which he's trying to decide as a prosecutor if a crime has actually been committed. Abdul Rahman is an older man who shot a young black man named Andrew Easley after an incident on a bus. This is a crime that we hear about in a ton of detail. They watch a video together from many, many angles. They basically see and hear the entire incident play out. I would love to sort of get the read from the panel of whether you guys think that this man actually committed a crime. I'm not asking you to, weigh judgment like, a jury would, but from what we hear and what we learn, what are your impressions of this incident? Do you think this guy committed a crime or not? Kevin, I'm going to start with you.
As I understood it in the podcast, that the state of Ohio, there are 3 prongs that have to be demonstrated to find out whether he acted in self-defense. And as I recall, one was, did he instigate the incident?
Yep.
Did he start it? Did he
try to retreat? And then did he fear for his life or his bodily safety? Yeah, and I think he demonstrated he did all 3 of those things. So in that sense, I think that looking at it as an act of self-defense is probably appropriate. What do you think, Toby?
I totally agree. I mean, I think he had every every right to feel as though his life was in danger. I mean, he was being advanced upon by two young men, one of whom had told him that he had a gun. So I don't know why he wouldn't be scared.
So you don't buy the argument that he used to be a boxer and therefore he shouldn't be afraid of people?
That's just
That's what I was going to
ridiculous.
rant on.
He wasn't a tag team wrestler. There's two of them.
Yeah, and the guy just told him he had a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if you're Mike Tyson. Some guy's walking up to you with a gun. It doesn't do you much good.
He would care if it's Mike Tyson.
Because Mike Tyson...
Because he literally got beat up by Mike Tyson.
38 seconds.
Oh,
down.
that's true. Hey, that's good, Kevin. I'm glad somebody's paying attention.
What do you think, Laura?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was the part when they're like, well, you may feel differently after you see this part. He's doing the boxer shuffle. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. He's scared. He's an old guy. He's probably trying to revert back to something that he knows because he's afraid for what's going to happen. And that's the only way that he probably knows to defend himself, aside from the gun that we didn't know he had. But I guess I didn't buy that as much, like, oh yeah, so this old guy's gonna now get in the boxing shuffle and wind up and fight these young people. It just didn't seem likely to me. It seemed more like he was probably like muscle memory, going back to what he knows.
Right.
The other thing is they know he's got a gun. Like he showed them his gun and they're still going after him.
But they thought it was a water gun thanks to the girlfriend. You remember that little piece?
Yeah,
in
but
their mind,
did they really...
It probably changed their perception of what was happening.
I don't understand why her boyfriend was going after him as well. That's the part that's confusing to me, because up until that moment, I'm not going to lie, Rachel on the bus was a little bit of a hero to me up until that moment. She was not doing that calculated bystander thing. She was trying to, rightly or wrongly in her tactics, de-escalate a situation that was getting incredibly ugly. She kicked the dude off the bus in the butt. I don't understand why the boyfriend, obviously we don't hear this detail or not. I like to imagine that this guy he just turned around and shot reflexively and just shot the wrong guy. I'm not saying it was right or wrong for him to shoot either one of the guys, but like the second guy doesn't sound like he was all that involved to begin with, right?
Right. You know, it's funny because I think about the two of the crimes that we listened to so far in the series that we feel the strongest about them being not guilty are the two we have videotape for.
Yeah.
And that really does build a lot of confidence in, how you feel about it. Did Davon pull the trigger?
We have no idea.
We don't have any idea. I mean, they don't seem like they have a lot of evidence for that. But I don't think any of us will be as confident as you are when you have videotape. And maybe just serendipitous that it's these two cases that we look at. But I think if the idea is, okay, we're going to examine something, but in order for you to really get what we're talking about, you have to reasonably believe this person's innocent. Because if you're going to spend a lot of time being distracted by, did he do it, didn't he do it, you're going to miss the other point, which in this case has to do with prosecutorial discretion.
Right. And I think we hear that because we hear that the witnesses on the bus, a lot of them said don't match what's in the video, which is incontrovertible. You can hear the dialogue in the video.
Yeah.
It's really something.
If only every crime had a videotape,
if only.
We would release so many people.
Then we'd complain that we were being surveyed way too much or whatever.
Well, you know who has the best videotapes is Market Basket. Oh my God.
Oh really?
They have the best surveillance videotapes of any place I ever watched.
Do you know this because of your work in
I do.
Criminal defense? Really?
I do, yes. And it was always like when you get a Market Basket video, oh my gosh, clear as day. Like you could see everything. It was awesome. So don't go trying to steal like a lobster roll or anything like that because they'll get you.
People who don't live in our area, who aren't familiar with the Market Basket brand, I recommend that you Google it because there was an amazing story from a couple of years ago involving Market Basket that dominated the New England news market. It is a discount supermarket chain that is a beloved brand. Where we live, all throughout New England, beloved in large part because of the prices, but also because of the excellent treatment of their workforce. People are paid well, they have great benefits. But when I call it a discount supermarket, I'm talking about misspelled signs on the freezer section.
No frills. It's very no frills. Yeah.
Yeah, but apparently they have great security. It's good to know. Very good to know.
It is. Yep.
All right. Well, I've got a question for you guys. Second question I want to ask every person on the panel. So Brian tells Sarah that he's not sure how he wants to charge this crime. So he's going to bring it to the grand jury. And instead of influencing the outcome, which we hear prosecutors typically do, they walk in and say, is it reasonable he could have committed murder? Let me just show you the 3 things I want you to see and you decide. He's going to give them everything. Sarah walks down to the Bird Poop Cafe.
Afterwards, I went down to the first floor atrium to get a snack. The atrium has a little cafe and tables and chairs that you have to choose carefully because they are frequently sprinkled with bird poop. Now you know. I was chatting with Emmanuel, and then we started talking to these 3 defense attorneys we knew at a nearby table. I told them about the Rahman case, about how much material Brian Radigan was going to show the grand jury. And their faces. One looked furious. Another was smirking. I feel like one of them rolled his eyes at me, but I might be making that up. Regardless, the gist was clear. He's putting on a show for you. It's never like that, they said. They never have that much evidence before they go to the grand jury. People get indicted for stuff in 90 seconds. No discussion. They knew you were coming, sucker.
Toby, what do you think? Is Brian putting on a show for Sarah Koenig, or is he a genuine nice guy?
He may be a nice guy, but while he was talking about that, I was like, there's no way he would normally do this. I thought it was a good moment when she goes down there and they pointed out to her, but I have to think that she must have felt the same way as well. I mean, there's no way you can do it that way. I mean, it's sort of counter to everything else she's talked about.
But she does know that he let go of the Davon case, which seems unusual to me. At least it seems unusual to me given all I know about like how these cases usually go. What do you think, Laura? Do you think he was playing her, or do you think he was genuine? What do you think?
I think a little bit of a combination, but I had to say, like at one point she described him as like the aw shucks kind of prosecutor. And I'm like, isn't that quaint? Because she's like the aw shucks. I mean, she uses that too. So her own little trick was used on her this time, I think. But I mean, I do think he seems like a nice guy. He seems like a reasonable guy. But I actually went back and listened a second time. And when I listened to it, I was like, yeah, I think he was really trying to come across like, I'm a good guy. And he might be. But it seemed like when I went and listened a second time, he definitely laid it on pretty thick.
What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think he definitely knew that he was part of a news report and he wanted to put his best foot forward. But apparently that's what he did, with the grand jury. We don't exactly know, but they know billed it. So we don't have any reason to believe that he didn't present it that way. I mean, This is also the guy who took the case for prosecuting a cop. I think he sounds like the kind of guy that is like, this is what we want. We want somebody to put a little, put their brain into this and find out whether or not this is worth pursuing. I mean, it sounded like the cops were pushing him one way.
He sounds like
and
he's
he
not the
pushed
worst.
It back the other.
He's definitely not the worst, for sure.
Yeah.
I do.
But also, listen, if you're going to say motivated by something, like if you're going to say like he has bad intentions and does it this way, I'd say, well, isn't the intention, instead of like ramming justice forward, wouldn't you say like his bad intention might be, I don't want to have to spend the time on this case. I'd rather spend it on this other one with this shooting and this guy who, we just arrested.
Right.
Instead of like going through the whole problem of like maybe pleading this guy down to something that maybe he didn't do. Why don't we just like, he basically said it, leave it to the grand jury. Let them decide.
Listen, I don't disagree with you that he does not sound like a terrible person who goes to work wanting to put people away. He sounds like a not so bad, he's not Kevin Urich. He's not Doug Evans. He's a regular person for whom this is his job, and he's doing it with, and we hear that a little bit about that later.
If this is the kind of person we're asking for, we can't shit on when we find one.
Right. Except there is one moment that reveals to me that he was putting on a bit of a show, which is when they're discussing the sentence in the next case. And he has Sarah in the room with her recorder, and he's got the cops and the other and he's like, well, what do you guys think the sentence should be? What do you guys like? There's no way he would just be asking passersby in the hallway their opinions about what sentences should be.
Well, you know what, though? They do that.
They do?
I will say that when I was working in defense, we would have cases where, once a week, everybody would sit around and they might present a case and say, this is what the plea offer is. This is what the facts of the case are. What do you think a reasonable deal is? And everybody would go around and sound in so that they would get advice so that when they went to negotiate the deal, they all had a sense of what they thought was a reasonable outcome for the case.
Well, I do want to talk about the negotiation that we hear in this podcast because it was a fascinating scene. There's a second case that we hear about. It involves a shooting outside a club. I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty, but it's, there was an off-duty cop involved, a guy who gunned down a guy outside a club. And then we are present for the plea deal between Brian and the defense attorney, who, fun fact, was also the defense attorney for that guy who locked 3 women in his basement. Not so fun fact. The plea bargaining, and this was an interesting scene only because this is exactly how I imagine it goes, but it is not how they show it on TV. So casual, the plea bargaining between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. So coffee conversation.
I was looking to range of 12 to 15 until you found this guy slithering around.
Brian's laughing because laughable. There's no way. 12 to 15 is more like armed robbery time. Weintraub knows that.
What do you think a bottom end number is on this?
Flat time or
Yeah,
it's gonna be a big number if it's not gonna be a life tail. That's the issue here.
Friendly, collegial. Sarah describes them as, quote, working on cases together. Like they've worked together on many cases. Like they are the colleagues in the room representing 2 different sets of interests. And it's all very collegial. And I like to imagine that is not the way the client imagines the negotiation is going on his behalf. Kevin, what do you think of that scene?
Well, I don't think that makes the defense attorney a poor advocate for his client because he maintains a good relationship with the prosecutors, which is we saw was an important thing in episode 1. We followed James Brolin or Sipowicz. Yeah, we followed him around. I think, Laura, you'll back this up. I mean, you in these courthouses, you meet the same people. You have an adversarial relationship, but it needs to be professional because there are times when you can work this out because you both want. Because what does this avoid? They try to avoid a trial, and it works. But neither side wants to really take the risk of going to trial. And certainly if the defense attorney thinks, man, this guy's like totally innocent. I don't want to say it like that. If he thinks he's innocent, he's going to take it to trial. But I think he's trying to work the best deal that he can because that's what that suspect's entitled to.
It's not all that different from what you're describing from the relationship between PR people and the media.
Yeah.
Toby, what did you think of this? I mean, one of the things that struck me, and I'm guessing it also struck you, the woke captain of cynicism that you are, the casualness with which decades are talked about with these sentences, the casualness with which 10 years is bandied about as a very light sentence, 20 years as a light sentence, and it's only in the 30s when it's considered appropriate, without talking about just like how the U.S. is just so out of line with the rest of the world in that thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It was almost surreal where it's just like, well, 25. It's like, that's 5 years. Like, you're just like, maybe. Yeah, I mean, you're just talking about a quarter to a half of these people's lives that's just sort of in quick banter, decisions are being made about it. And again, I mean, we just incarcerate so many people for so long, and it's so out of step with everywhere else that we would consider to be our peers in the international. I looked up to see what that guy Andres Breivik, or the guy who killed 77 people. It was 21 years. Although there's a provision there where after that 21 years he can be reevaluated and they can keep him in.
This is in Sweden.
But the idea is that 21 years is the maximum that you're ever going to give somebody, just like as a straight sentence. So Breivik gets 21 years for killing 77 people and bombing the Swedish parliament. And then so these guys are getting like 21 years for, which are, it's not like they're not serious crimes, but crimes with mitigating circumstances, crimes where, the evidence is pretty good, but it's not totally conclusive. It seems crazy.
Yeah, I actually agree with you because I do think the value of a year is really off kilter in the criminal justice system. When I was listening to that negotiation between 20 years and 30 years, it's almost like 20 years doesn't sound like enough, but 30 does. That's not actually a measure of time, whether or not it sounds like a long time to you. 1 year is a long time to be in prison. 5 years is a very long time. 10 years is an exceptionally long time. Kevin, I'm just going to put it out there. Yeah. And I apologize for not having warned you about this.
Okay.
If someone murdered you
How would I feel?
And I learned they were going to prison for 10 years. That would still sound to me like a very long time.
That sounds like a very light sentence for taking someone's life.
You know why it sounds like that?
Why?
Because that's how it sounds. But that doesn't mean it's not a long time.
Right, but the whole point of this exercise, and Sarah said this, is to come up with the Goldilocks number that the defendant will accept.
That's right.
Right, because and then they're working this backwards. When they come up with the number, and maybe the two of them agree 25 years with no life. What do they call it? A life trail?
Tail.
A life tail. If it's 25 years, then Brian's going back and coming up with those stacked charges that are going to add up to that.
Right.
And not more and not less.
Right.
And that's part of
They're working it backwards.
They're working it backwards. Like it or not, there's a benefit to the state and there is a benefit to the defendant to do it that way.
And they also talk about the Goldilocks number for the victim. The victim's family. It's like you want to feel heard, you want to feel there was justice, and you want to feel something.
Yeah.
And there's no talk anywhere, as she points out in the high moment for me of the episode, about fighting crime, about lowering the crime rate, about lowering recidivism, about preventing crime, about improving communities. Nobody in the system at any point in this process is willing to talk about it even for a second. Not even this so-called good guy, Brian. I don't want to say so-called. He seems like a fine person, but not even willing to engage in that conversation. It's just not part of the formula when they go to work every day. It's super interesting. That part to me was interesting. All right, well, let's do what we do and just talk about this episode of Serial Season 3. This is episode 5, Pleas Baby Pleas. I'm going to go around the horn and ask my fellow panelists to give this episode a letter grade, any letter grade you like, and briefly explain why you are assigning it that grade. Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you.
Well, this is hard because I was thinking about this today, and I think I judge Serial at a different level than I do other podcasts that we listen to.
It's fair.
But I'm not really in love with this season. And I have to tell you that today's episode, I kind of kept tuning out because I was like, I don't feel that same investment that I feel when I'm following one person and I'm invested in listening to their story. So I definitely had some times where I had to be like, wait, pay attention. What's happening? What's going on? Because I felt like it was a little bit all over the place, jumping between different cases that she was doing. I'm going to go with a solid B. And that's a different B than other podcasts. But just for me, this particular episode, I just really had a hard time getting into.
Well, Laura, you're off the hook because we don't actually assign letter grades to other podcasts. We only do it for Serial. So it's okay for you to assign letter grades based on the Serial scale and not
this
the
is the Serial scale.
Yeah, we're not like on the Up Advantage scale here. This is the Serial scale. It is a higher bar to get a letter grade. Toby Ball, what about you? What letter grade would you assign this episode and why?
What I think is missing in some ways, I mean, this isn't like the main issue, I think, with this season. There's no way in which your point of view is changing at any time during these. Like, that was part of what was so great about season 1, is that it seemed like after every episode, you had to reevaluate everything. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the genius of it, I guess, was that like after every episode, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. And I've got to rethink all these other things I was thinking. And what does this mean about this or that or the other thing? And, I think they tried to do that with the Bo Bergdahl. It wasn't as successful, but it seemed like that was in their mind. And then this one, it's not even a part of it. I don't think you're supposed to reevaluate the earlier episodes based on what you learn. It's not as cohesive, and it's not. I guess it's just not as fun to listen. Mm-hmm. So for this one, I guess I agree with Laura in that I guess I give it a B, but it's kind of, again, it's like if there's like a really good band is putting out a CD. And you pick it up, you listen, and it's like super competent, but you can tell they're kind of phoning it in. It's not particularly inspired. And I kind of feel like that's the way this season has been for me. It's like people who are really, really good at what they're doing have a pretty good idea about what to do and are doing it super competently, but there's not that extra something that kind of pushes it into what we expect from Serial.
Right. And I guess if a band is putting out a CD, it's like the 90s. And this would have been a really good podcast in the 90s, right? Before podcasting.
Yeah. And I should probably explain what a CD was for some of our younger listeners.
I'm with you guys. I am also in B territory, not any higher than a B. And for me, the reason is a little more specific to the structure of this episode. There was a lot here that had a lot of potential that went unmined or undermined. And for me, Sarah had the opportunity here to tell a different story about prosecutors than the story about prosecutors we've heard in so many other true crime podcasts. And she went halfway there in talking about, the bus case that she gets into in the podcast. And then we have this whole second case. This episode was over an hour long, and I'm not complaining when an episode of Serial is an hour long, because sometimes an episode should be an hour long. But this is one of the first times I've ever felt listening to this podcast that the episode was too long. There were too many stories, too many turns, and if the point was this job is a hard job in a system that's unwinnable, but sometimes it's actually a job done by a nice person who's just doing what they can with what they have to work with, and that was supposed to be the Brian story, then give us more of Brian. Give us Brian at home. Drive with Brian somewhere in his car. Sarah, show us what changed about you in learning about Brian, instead of giving us a 10-minute soliloquy about facts and then dipping in and out of the story. It felt a little bit soulless to me in a way that it was unnecessary for it to. So yeah, I'm tops a B, maybe even a B- for this episode. Kevin, what about you?
I'm going to go a B+. I'm going to give it that grade based on what's in this episode. I'm not going to grade it against all the previous other Serial seasons that you guys all seem to want it to be. I think that it's unfortunate that you're seeing it that way.
I think that is like actually a mischaracterization. I don't want it to be Serial Season 1 or Serial Season 2. This is the best podcast ever made. I want it to be a podcast that I can't wait to listen to when the next episode comes out.
Yeah, that's exactly
Period.
right. Because
that's all I want.
The episode ends and you don't have that feeling of like, I can't wait for next week to see what happens.
I think that just that expectation just sort of belies that you're just looking at the other serials and you want to get the same sort of thing out of it.
I want the same
and you're
feeling.
not looking at this for this, whether it's better or worse. No podcast is going to look good going up against Serial Season 1.
In the Dark
including out of how many? That
we've
done,
it's rare.
right?
It's rare.
Including Serial.
It's rare.
Right? You know, so the Beatles didn't do better than Sgt. Pepper with the White Album.
I don't love Sgt. Pepper. It's my least favorite Beatles
this
album.
Is my
but...
time. This is my time, everybody. This is Kevin time. I'm giving it a B+ because I still think it's very well. I think the only downside to me was there wasn't a lot of tension in this idea about where the sentences, where the pleas are going to go. We had that in episode 1 when we looked at the bar fight. And again, we saw the video. We went into it not sort of wondering whether or not somebody did it, but it was sort of the danger of, is this person going to be used up by the system?
Stakes were high.
And I just didn't feel that was there, although you can start to see where they're stitching together a bunch of different stories. And this is what they said in the beginning, that they were breaking format. There's going to be some stories. Sometimes it's one. Sometimes it's going to go through the stuff. So I'm just going along. I'm just going to walk my way through it. And when I do that, I'm going to have my Bombas socks on.
I'll make it that much better.
Yeah,
I bet Radigan wears Bombas socks.
It took 2 years of research and development and multiple improvements in design for performance and comfort, but Bombas are now the most comfortable socks in the history of feet.
Really?
Yeah, Feet said that.
I'm wearing Bombas socks
certified.
right now. Yeah, they're my favorite socks.
They're pretty awesome. I wore them last week when I hiked the mountain. They were pretty awesome.
Yeah, you can certainly tell Bombas socks, they have that stay-up technology that ensures your socks stay in place without leaving a mark. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Like it's you
get that weird sock band on your ankle?
Exactly. They have a super soft cotton material that makes you never want to take them off. So whether you're a runner, a power walker, a rage walker, a power lounger,
a dog walker,
yes, there's a pair of Bombas socks that'll add comfort to your life. The problem with Bombas socks in our house is what?
Are you going to talk about the giant basket of errant socks in our laundry room?
No. I think, look, we have a bunch of Bombas socks. A lot of them are very colorful.
Yep.
So you can always tell, which, we've got some of the neon ones. We also have the ones that are black and the heel and the toe.
Or orange.
Colors. Yeah.
Those are my favorites.
But I think some of these are mine, and you think some of those are yours, and some end up in the boys' room. And this is just a fight
over the
It's
socks.
a fight waiting to happen,
It's a territorial fight.
Go to bombas.com/crime and use the code CRIME for 20% off your first order. That's Bombas, BOMBAS.com/crime. Code CRIME, and you'll get 20% off your first order.
What else you got, Kevin?
We have a new sponsor this week.
We do.
It's Talkspace, the online therapy company that lets you message a licensed therapist from anywhere at any time.
It's a fancy sponsor. I've heard them on a lot of fancy podcasts.
If you're working in the day, it may be hard to be able to get away for an appointment, like to see a therapist at a regular schedule. And sometimes when you need to talk about something, get something off your chest, it might not be something that you can plan. So that's where Talkspace comes in. All you need is a computer with an internet connection or the Talkspace mobile app, and you can improve your mental health. They get you right to a licensed therapist, and you can have the same therapist. You know, sometimes it is just sort of about just, venting about what's going on at work. It doesn't have to be necessarily going back into your deep past and talking about your relationship with your mother.
It's getting you through the day.
Yeah, it's about having practical everyday strategies for stress management and living a happier life. So the Talkspace platform has over 20,000 licensed therapists who are experienced in addressing life challenges that we all meet. To match with a perfect therapist for a fraction of the price of traditional therapy, go to Talkspace.com/crimewriters.
Crime Writers.
And use the code CRIMEWRITERS to get $45 off your first month and show your support for this show. You could also just be, Laura Bricker and walk around angry all the time.
Yeah, I have nowhere to vent that anger.
Well, Laura, then I want you to write this down. It's Talkspace.com/crimewriters and code CRIMEWriters.
I'm writing it down right now.
Moving on. The newest podcast from Stitcher and another company called Little Everywhere is called The Dream. Host Jane Marie explores the sketchy world of multi-level marketing in which self-starters peddle products but are actually just selling the business to their friends who then selling it to their friends.
Who selling it to their friends?
Mm-hmm.
Who selling it?
Oh, that must be one of those schemes. He's talking about getting rich quick. I sure hope it is. You ever try getting rich slow?
Think about your Facebook feed or your Instagram. Which of your cousins or high school classmates has an incredible business opportunity for you? Work from home. Set your own hours. Get out of debt. Say goodbye to your boss forever. What you'll be selling, that doesn't matter. Leggings, essential oils, diet shakes, it's all the same. No, what's important is your ability to network. Financial freedom is just one click away. What do you have to lose? A lot, actually.
Part history lesson, part undercover investigation, and part personal memoir. The Dream looks at the pyramid schemes, but they don't call them that, right in plain sight, and the people who willingly go along with them. Now, we are going to be giving away spoilers for The Dream's first few episodes, so if you want, you can jump to our spoiler-free review by checking out the time code in the show notes. Now, I want to do a quick poll of the panel. Tell me about your own experiences or, experiences that you've had in your life that have touched on this whole MLM thing. Laura Bricker, what about you? I bet you have some MLMs in your life.
Well, Rebecca, I'm sorry to tell you, your invitation has not yet gotten there for my Tupperware party next week because I am not a Tupperware consultant, but one of my friends is. So I, want to help her out. So we're having a Tupperware party at my house. I seem to get sucked into these things. I went to the Mary Kay and Mimosa party this spring.
Yep.
That was kind of fun. I went to an adult novelty party a few years ago. That
Sex
was really
toys.
interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I learned more about people than I ever really wanted to know. What else have I gone to? The Pampered Chef. Oh my God, it just goes on and on. And then,
Is that a
Lulu
rolling
Row.
pin or a vibrator? I forget which party I got that from.
And then the Lulu Row fad of a few years ago, the leggings. I really got sucked into that, and I have some rage about that I don't really need to go into today.
Yeah,
but
they're not dress pant yoga pants.
They're not. They are not.
So, Kevin, what's your life experience with MLMs? Do you have any?
I don't have any, really. My mom sold stuff at parties when I was in high school to make a little extra money. I remember it was...
That was an MLM.
It was, yeah. It was Colonial Crafts.
That's an MLM.
Is it? Yeah, I don't remember her not that I got involved at all. I don't remember her talking about having to bring other people in. But I wonder whether or not she had to buy the stuff up front herself,
maybe.
or whether they sold it. Because there is a way of doing it where you're just selling stuff and you're the middle person, but you're not buying all. That's part of the problem. These people are buying all the inventory themselves.
You don't have to, but it helps, is what we hear.
Quote unquote helps, yeah.
So I have a couple of experiences with MLMs. I have been a long time resistor of this. When I was a stay-at-home mom, a bunch of my stay-at-home mom friends started getting into these stupid selling stuff things. And I found myself being invited to all these things where I'm like, this is predatory. I felt like my stay-at-home mom friends were like the victims of predatory behavior. And I remember like saying this to people and people being like really offended. And then I remember saying to you, Kevin, like one of our friends, we made the joke about life coaches earlier, was like, I'm going to be a life coach. I'm like, no, she's joining an MLM. It's a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, and you'll make a horrible life coach.
And I have this other...
I should sell mascara instead.
That's right. And I have this other friend who I adore who sells, and it's referred to in the podcast in one of the clips, those like bags, which is like the quote Christian bag company. And I'm like, you're not even Christian. Like, why is this a Christian? She's like, I don't know. It's just, it's to have values. I'm like, would they not provide birth control for their factory workers?
There's no birth control pocket in there. Yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing is just very, very strange. Anyway, it is a part of all of our lives. And I just wanted to mention to our listeners that during the commercial break, Toby lost his internet. So we're just waiting for him to come back, and we're going to soldier on without him.
I texted him and said we're going to talk about it. I mean, because he might not ever come back. We might not ever finish this podcast.
That's right. So we have to soldier on. So hopefully he joins us again. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, we'll hear him later.
So when I went to my one of my MLM parties, I ended up buying pheromones. They were supposed to...
Supposed to do what? Get fireman Ken all hot and bothered?
I guess. It was like, it's like this little, like, a perfume that you put on. It's like, put on the pheromones and it will adapt to your body. And I was like, okay.
The only good thing I ever bought from an MLM is I didn't actually go to the party, but like my mom had the catalog, and I bought a deviled egg tray from Pampered Chef, which you freeze the thing inside so you want to bring deviled eggs to parties.
Oh, that's actually a good thing.
It's actually quite convenient if you make deviled eggs frequently, which I do. All right. Anyway.
I just got a text message from Toby.
Yeah.
It says, fuck.
Oh, no.
Tell him we'll be fine.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
I'll keep providing the update, people.
Okay. This is so unprofessional, by the way.
Hey, it is what it is.
People always talk about how well produced our podcast is.
It's bullshit. I just disconnected Toby because I didn't like his review of Serial.
All right. Well, soldiering on. I want to talk a little bit about episode 1. Something that a bunch of ex-hippies talk about that they participated in way back in the day called the airplane game. First question, how do we get that game going again? It sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah. Laura, want to come over with your chair?
Oh, yeah. It sounded like an easy way to make some cash.
It did. But Kevin,
I could get some people on my plane.
We heard once again that this is something that sprung from the so-called human potential movement in the 60s and 70s when everyone is just like looking for answers to become elevated and make themselves better people. I'm just going to count on one hand quickly some of the things we've talked about on this podcast that have sprung from that bullshit human potential movement.
All right.
Scientology, the Rajneeshis, basically every cult we've ever talked about, Heaven's Gate, and MLMs.
Yeah.
Thoughts about the whole human potential movement?
Pretty disappointing. There's so much potential. It's so much potential. Yeah. Somewhere there's a guy that was just like, this like really, this like he's the one guy who's become self-actualized doing this, and everybody else is just making money off everyone else.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I was hoping that you could also weigh in on, Kevin, is some of the legalese used in this episode. They do a very good job skirting the things they're not allowed to say by telling us the things they're not allowed to say.
Yeah.
Is that how you would have approached it if you were putting the show together?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have it. I mean, they're very litigious organizations. So, yes, I would be
just
extra
like cults.
careful. I would be very careful about how I presented it. Here's one that stood out to me. And she was talking about the makeup. She said,
Limelight.
After playing with the makeup, I bet you're dying to know what it's like. Here is my personal and professional opinion. It's gross. I hate it. It smells bad, the packaging is unhygienic and cheap looking, and the foundation actually felt like wearing Noxzema all day.
She said, this is my personal and professional opinion. It sucks. What did she say? It's
gross.
It's gross. All right. Now, the legal couching of that is, first of all, she said it's her opinion.
Right.
And she's legally allowed to have an opinion.
That's correct.
But if she says, we got this makeup and it's gross.
Yes.
Or worse, I got this, we got the makeup and it caused me to break out in hives.
Right.
She made a
claim.
You're making a claim and it puts you in legal jeopardy there. So that is now that doesn't mean that they're not going to get their asses sued by Lime Life, I guess that it is now or whatever. But they are really scrubbing this, but they haven't lost, the story that they're telling.
Am I putting us in legal jeopardy when I say it is my personal opinion that Limelight/Lime Life is a freaking pyramid scheme?
Well, if they haven't come for this podcast yet, I'm, we're nothing.
Well, let's talk about.
No, but you could say it is in your opinion. It sounds like a pyramid scheme.
It was crazy. I have to tell you, I was so enraged listening to that when they were talking about how they paid them in these stupid Visa gift cards that you had to
yes.
Oh my God. I was like, are you freaking kidding me?
And you know who's getting those fees? Some of it's Visa, but a lot of it's going back to those people.
That's right.
Too. Yeah.
That's right.
None of it was divulged because you can't learn anything ahead of time because it's all super secret squirrel information. Oh my God, that was really bad. Because I do know some people that have had okay experiences with these companies, but that was horrible.
Now, when you say that you know some people who have had okay experiences with these companies, now we are skipping ahead to episode 3 here, which I think is the strongest episode of the series by far. This is the one where producer Mackenzie buys into an MLM, goes super secret undercover by getting a credit card and going online.
Yes.
Which was really funny. I have to say that tape, I just want to play that for a second.
So I'm here enrolling to be a beauty guide in training for Limelight by Alcone. I've already gone through step 1, which is to pick a basic starter kit based on my complexion. There were 3 choices, light, medium, and dark. So I chose mine. Now I'm filling out my information. They're asking for things like 3 different phone numbers. They're asking for my email address. And I actually went and created another email address just in case this all goes south. Now I'm to this part, set up your website. Okay, so signing over my life right now, along with my credit card and my home address.
So they talk about this as if it's a super secret undercover operation, and literally she's just taping herself at home, going and joining up. And I'm like, why didn't she just do this at the office where they had the good microphones? I don't understand. Yeah. Anyway, but one of the things that episode points out is that these companies, there's no data available not only to potential associates / salespeople / victims, but also to media or anyone about how much money somebody could actually make, or how much money the company is making, or anything. Mm-hmm. And so when you say, Laura, that you have friends who've had okay experiences, they're not actually doing this and making real money. They're okay experiences.
No, I don't think they're making real
else.
money. I think they've got, and these are folks that I think are early on into the process, but because I actually checked in with a few of them, I said, I'm listening to this podcast. It's awful. Are you getting totally screwed over yet? And some of these people are we do it on our own time. We do as much as we want. We don't necessarily, but they're not making big money. But I will say we have a listener who is really into some MLMs, and she's often posting on her social media about a lot of money that she's making. So I don't know. But, in my personal circle, I do know people that are doing okay. I wouldn't say it's a full-time job or anything.
Right. But we also learned, Laura, from this podcast that even if you're not making a lot of money, you're supposed to post on social media as if you're making a lot of money from these MLMs.
The time. Yes, because you have to post and post and post.
Now, Toby, you're back. You've rejoined us from your internet hellscape. Congratulations.
Mobile hotspot.
I want you to weigh in on one thing we talked about while you were gone, which is that everything we've talked about on this podcast and the history of this podcast that has sprung from the human potential movement has turned into total crap. Do you agree with that, Toby Ball?
Yeah. I do. I actually I find that stuff really interesting, human potential movement, and then all the stuff that was kind of going on around that, like EST and all these other things. So it kind of hits my sweet spot in that way. Somebody's got to do a podcast about all the good stuff that came out of the human potential movement.
It would be one episode, though, right?
It's not getting great publicity right now.
Now, Toby, We skipped ahead for a second, but I want to go back to episode 2 of this podcast.
Okay.
I know it had an actual title, but I'm just going to call the episode Jane Marie Goes Home, because that's really what it's all about. This is kind of the memoir episode of the podcast, and I think the intention of it was for Jane to talk to her own family who have this generational tie to these MLMs. Do you really think this episode, which has some beautifully written moments, I should say, and some like beautifully produced moments, do you think it actually gets to that bottom of the pyramid promise that she makes that she's going to talk to real people who are actually doing this thing? Or do you think this was just a little bit memoir-y?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was memoir-y. I understand where the instinct was coming from and maybe even the logic for having it there. But I think if you're going to go that far into kind of like your personal history and your family and stuff, that maybe putting it later when you sort of gain the listener's trust a little bit more. Because I was just kind of thrown off, and maybe I missed it in the first episode, but I didn't realize how like disjointed this was all going to be. Like the first episode, I was psyched. I was like, this is going to be awesome if we're getting like 10 episodes of this. And then the second episode came and I was like, what just happened? But maybe this is what we're really going to be focusing on. Maybe that was like an introductory episode and this is going to be the focus now. And then the third episode came up and I was like, how does this connect to anything that's come before? And then by the time the fourth episode, I was just like, you know what? It's just like different kinds of podcasts that are sort of held together by like a very, very broad theme, but that you can't really, at least so far, there doesn't seem to be much other connection in any way.
I think Toby's right about sort of the style of each of the 4 individual episodes.
So far,
they've all been very different from one another. You know, I thought the first one, was really good. You got a lot of information. You got sort of this is the education about how this stuff works. The going home one, felt different. And by the time we get to episode 4, it's like Radio Lab, where it's this two-way talking thing. The episode 3, where, the producer signs up for Limelight, it doesn't feel like really investigative to be
a participant behind the curtain.
Well, is it? I mean, to be a participant in that, I guess it's a way of looking at it. I mean, they're not going through corporate headquarters and
it's a little bit
pulling
stunty. I still liked it though. I mean, I'm going to tell you,
you have to do something to demonstrate,
right?
How this, you
right.
know.
But
I'm not saying that as a pejorative.
Right.
I'm just, I think that's just a description of a kind of journalism where it's like, I'm going to do something and let's see what happens.
See,
and we'll report on it.
I don't feel as put off by the different formats of the episodes as you guys do, because I do think she says in the first episode, our plan is this. We're going to tell stories going each successive episode up the pyramid. So we're going to start with sort of like broad stuff.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about salespeople, and then we're going to talk about the people closer to the top the further up we go.
Right.
And so far, it has followed that, because first you have sort of the history, then you have like the broad base. I do think that only looking at her own family as the case study of people who are into this is weaker than what we hear in the trailer for the podcast. We hear this great montage of like YouTube videos of people like extolling their experiences. That's not as strong as it could have been because it didn't bring in some of those elements. I thought episode 3, I agree, it was a little bit of stunt journalism. I thought it was fantastic. It was entertaining.
Yeah, I didn't say they were all right. I just said they're all different in style.
But they're all different.
Yes.
And I really liked episode 2, except I felt like the intro was like too long. I did not necessarily need the huge description going
driving
into the town. Yeah, that part I was like, okay, enough already. But I will say what I liked about that episode was I really think there is a culture among women that end up signing up for these. And I think it really got to the heart of that. I mean, it's like, why do I get stuck going to all these parties? Well, because like when you become a parent and you're busy and you don't have a social life, it's a way to go see your friends, and then you have to buy something. But you still get to have some wine and treats while you're there. So it does become sort of a social outlet for people. And I think that episode did get at that. And it got at it in a rural area. I mean, Fireman Ken still has not let me live down. We were like up in like the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, at this like very like small bar one time. And there was these women in there selling LuLaRoe leggings. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Of course, then I had a glass of wine and I'm like, well, we're in the middle of nowhere. Like, where else are these women going to sell these leggings? I'll go buy some. And it was just because I felt like, they were trying to do something. So I can see the culture angle of it. I thought it was really interesting that they got at that.
The one part about it that I loved was the discussion about the messaging that targets women specifically from these MLMs. This hashtag be your best you, hashtag girl boss messaging, and what they tell women to put out there. And we heard all of this great tape of women extolling what they got from these companies that had nothing to do with money.
I really feel lucky, or as they say here in the South, blessed, that this came along, because I really feel like everybody is rooting for you.
And I doubted myself for a long time. I doubted myself for a very long time. But what I can tell you, I have met some of the most incredible women. And I've had so many people tell me, you live in a fantasy world, in your little makeup world. And I'm telling you, this has been my happy place. And this has been the place. I'm sorry. This has been the place that has gotten me through so many rough points of my life in the past 3 years.
Now, this is what I see with my MLM friends. I see one of my very good friends, the Christian Bag one. All of her posts are about the positive feelings she has about doing this, about the community around it, about the girl powerness of it. She never talks about actually making any money. She never talks about it being like a business that's changed her life. And I always kind of wonder, and I think that's kind of what they're trying to get at here, but maybe didn't quite get to, is how much of this is not just targeting women, but targeting unhappy women, targeting dissatisfied women, targeting women who don't have opportunities because they're offering them something that, like, I was telling Kevin last night, like, we're pretty privileged, right? We get to sit on our porch and drink a glass of wine. Like, if we want to have dinner with friends and, like, have our be your best you moment, we can just call friends and, like, they'll come over and do that with us because we live in a place like the place we live. And, like, we don't have to work a second job just to sort of make ends meet.
What are you talking? What are we doing right now?
Well, it's true. We are doing a second job.
Who the fuck up? We don't have a second job.
But I'm saying, like, there is like a socioeconomic part, but there's also sort of like a happiness thing that these companies promise. They're trying to build some sort of fake community. And that seems to be kind of what they're getting at. Toby, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that I thought, one of the issues with the second episode is that it really places the MLM phenomenon in a certain social class.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem completely accurate as you go, like, the next episode.
Yep.
That was another sort of criticism I had, is that it seems to be painting with a pretty narrow brush in this case, like what seems to be have like a larger population of people that it's sort of, I don't guess exploiting is the right word, but engaging.
I agree. And we hear certainly stories about how poor people are being exploited, like people who don't have credit and whatever are being exploited. Mm-hmm. But we also hear just about, like, unhappy women suddenly sounding like they finally found something. I don't know. I thought that stuff, I thought it had a lot of promise and I thought it was interesting. So then also in episode 4, we meet who I have to think of as the L. Ron Hubbard of MLMs. This guy, William Penpatrick, who has all this archive tape. Sounds a hell of a lot like L. Ron Hubbard.
I love the background music in his in the tapes or the records. They're listening to records that they got, and it's really, the background music is wonderful.
The mind is like a fertile field. Its size, the limits of your imagination. It, like the field, will grow whatever you plant. One seed planted and properly nourished with warmth and moisture will return thousands of such seeds. Work is required to keep the weeds from choking it, and work is required to nourish it, because we know that everything has its price.
It was like on Lost. Remember that? It was like
the Dharma Initiative?
Toby, doesn't this sound like weirdly familiar? Like, he's the archetype MLM owner. He sort of has that whole speech about, like, I make more money in a week than most people make all year, but I could stop whenever I want. Like, doesn't it seem like weird that anybody would want to follow somebody who says that, but doesn't it also even seem like super familiar?
Yeah, it's like everybody. It's like that's just such an American type.
Yeah.
And I think L. Ron Hubbard was definitely one, but I think P.T. Barnum is similar. I mean, there's all these preying upon American naive optimism and this idea that if you try really hard and live the correct way or whatever, that you'll make it. It's taking advantage of that sort of American mindset and just fleecing you, basically.
Well, we hear that in some of those training videos and like those conferences where the guy's like, if you're not making a lot of money selling my super shitty product, it's not the product.
It's not customer service. It's you.
That is uniquely American. This whole idea of like, if only you work hard enough, you could be just as rich as the next guy. That is actually not true. That is a American promise.
No,
that
it's
is
total bullshit.
It's not true.
They make it so it's like pretty much impossible, even if you do work hard.
Right.
Is anybody getting rich from whatever that thing on episode 3 is?
Limelight?
I mean,
Limelight.
the people who founded it.
The super smelly makeup.
Yeah, they're getting super rich.
Yeah. Because they have their own Visa card that they pay you in Visa cards, Toby. You don't think that's a good idea?
30 makeovers in 30 days, Toby.
Laura, do you know 30 people you give makeovers to in 30 days?
Probably. But
You would.
just because they'd get sick of listening to me, probably they'd be like, fine.
Jesus, it's like
I
going
know
to
30
AA.
people would be sketched out if I asked them if I could.
I do want to give one production nod here. Peter Clowney, we hear, is the editor of this podcast, and he has a very specific style of editorial and audio editing that is, I know it when I hear it because I listen to so many podcasts, but there's one little moment that I want to play at the beginning of episode 4, just at the very start of the episode.
Imagine if at your current job, the size of your paycheck was directly proportional to your ability to sell a flawed mathematical formula so successfully that the people you're selling it to also want to sell it. Would that make you feel empowered? Does that sound fulfilling? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not asking you a question. I'm reading my VO.
Pop quiz. Does anybody know here something we've talked about on this show that Peter Clowney also had a very heavy hand in editing?
No, you're the only one who would know that.
Okay, so you might recognize the style, something that some of you sent me in your notes, the style where you hear people talking to each other in the podcast during interviews. You might recognize that style from the episodes of Reply All with Sruthi Penamanini.
Oh, right.
The true crime episodes, those were also edited by Peter Clowney. He has a very distinct style where he brings the behind the scenes, what's happening in making the podcast into the podcast.
Well, Jane Marie is an alumnus of This American Life.
Yep.
And so there is some cross-pollination, you think, with the Sarah Koenig style.
Yep.
And certainly she has, some of those same reporter-host qualities.
Zoe Chase is who she reminds me of.
Well, she's trying to bring her personality through, and you get it, and she's got an interesting personality. And, so that's kind of like what you get, certainly in episodes 2, 3, and 4.
Yep.
And they keep doing more and more. I just got to be careful, like where the edge is on that before she just is getting clown-ish.
I agree. I think there was a little too much of that.
Episode 4 was too distracting for me. I'm like, enough already with the inside joke, and you like the guy that you're working with because he's so funny.
I agree. It's too much. I agree. No, I actually completely agree with you guys. To me, that's where this podcast starts to show its seams a little bit. Well, let's do what we do. Let's tell our listeners, should they listen to The Dream from Stitcher? Let's do what we do, thumbs up or thumbs down, and why. Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you.
I say thumbs up. It is a little disjointed and it does jump around, but I am just so fascinated by MLMs, so I'm in, especially if you come to my Tupperware party and buy some Tupperware. Because if you buy stuff, I get free stuff, okay? And then I'm in, so.
But do you?
Well, I'll tell you what I got. I got a pretty good wine opener last time.
If you become a freaking Tupperware salesperson, Laura, I'm going to kick you off this damn podcast. Of course, I'll probably buy $500 worth of Tupperware first, and then I'll kick you off this damn podcast.
I'm Laura Bricker, and this is Tupperware Saleswomen On, the podcast about other kitchen containers.
It's got potential.
Toby Ball, what about you? By the way, Tupperware was invented in New Hampshire. Just going to give a shout out.
No spoilers.
That was actually my favorite detail of the entire thing is about how her aunt or whatever washes out her plastic bags.
Foil.
What the hell?
Her grandma. And I love how everyone in her family thinks grandma has a lot of money. I am betting her grandma does not have a lot of money, but everybody thinks she does. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's those things get ingrained.
That's right.
I remember my grandmother had like pieces of used aluminum foil of all different sizes. And you can just like dig through and find the right size for whatever you needed.
PAUSs, pieces of aluminum foil of all sizes. All right, Toby, thumbs up or thumbs down for you on The Dream, and why?
You know, I'm always like, oh, I'm conflicted. But in this case, for some of the episodes, I'm like a happy thumbs up. And then some of the episodes, I'm sort of more of a thumbs down. I guess I would give it generally a thumbs up. I mean, I think the problem is, you know, they're trying to do a bunch of different styles like Kevin was talking about before. And I think they do some of the styles better than others so that the ones that they're doing that they're good at are good. And the ones that they're doing that they're less good at are, as you would imagine, less good. So I really like number 1. And I thought 3 was good and 4 was, you know, okay. And the second one I wasn't that crazy about. Which is a long way of saying like a thumbs up, but with some qualifications.
Yeah, I like this way better than you guys. I'm going to give it a thumbs up, a fairly strong thumbs up, even though I agree that there are moments where I'm like, okay, podcast people, you know how to keep this tight. Keep it tight. Episode 3 was tight. There was a ton of information and a really fun set of scenes where producer Mackenzie was trying to figure out which MLM she should get into because what people in her social media believe that she would actually be into. She's like, I really need something that's a little more upscale. No one's going to believe that I want to put saran wrap around my legs. I just loved that. I love the personality of these two women that we've heard, especially these two former beauty bloggers and reporters who are helming this podcast. I love Jane Marie. I love the writing. I think it's very, very punchy. Jane writes very well for herself. And yeah, there are some seams showing. I would definitely cut down on the insider jokiness. I would cut down on some of like the sort of longer portions of storytelling, but I get what they're trying to do. And overall, I am really enjoying this podcast. I think it's entertaining. I'm going to continue listening, and I don't always continue listening to stuff, even that I give a thumbs up to. Kevin Flynn, what about you?
I'm with Toby. I'm generally a thumbs up. I think that stylistically, it's a little uneven because they're kind of going different ways in each one, so I'm not quite certain what its actual voice is. And my knock on it would be that in regards to a look at MLMs, that it seems to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Going forward, I'd like to see it have a little more substance in that area. But I think it's been very educational so far. I know Rebecca saved me from ever going to a party where they're selling knockoff gelatin and cold cuts wrapped in cream cheese.
Yes.
Because if I want nourishment, I am going to have my Daily Harvest.
Yay!
Daily Harvest delivers perfectly portioned cups of frozen organic fruits and vegetables directly to your door. All you have to do is you add some water or maybe some milk.
Coconut milk.
Some almond milk.
You can just blend it or you can heat it up. Okay, so one of the things I have been trying, they have these new Harvest bowls. So along with the nice frozen smoothies, you can have something warm, and it can be a meal by itself, or it can be, you can add it with maybe some protein. The thing that I like is the red lentil cumin. Put it in the microwave, heat it up. You can put it in some water. You put a little broth, heat it up, and then stir it up. And you can either put it back in the cup or put it right in a bowl, and it's ready for dinner. Go to daily-harvest.com and enter promo code CRIME to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's promo code CRIME for 3 free Daily Harvest cups at daily-harvest.com. That's daily-harvest.com.
What else you got, Kevin?
Well, it's time to get organized around the house. When you clean out your closet full of old camcorder tapes, those aging film reels, what are you going to do with them? You're just going to let all those photos go yellow and watch all the camcorders, cassettes that don't fit anything? You're just going to let them collect
I'd rather
dust?
not. What can I do?
Well, you can ensure your family history is preserved forever with Legacy Box.
Yay, Legacy Box.
All you got to do is take all of those things and put your old home movies and the photos, you put it in the Legacy Box. And they do the rest. They professionally digitize your moments onto a thumb drive or a digital download. It's great to give to somebody, especially somebody who doesn't know a lot about digital stuff.
Are you talking about old people?
I'm trying to be correct
The
here.
elderly?
I'm just saying.
Your parents?
Look, I'm just saying. I can't remember if I've mentioned this on this show before, but my parents, when they got married, the photographer died after the wedding.
Yeah.
Right? And they never got an album. All they got was a bunch of little proofs. And so I was able to get all of those, and they digitized them, and they look great, and they can blow them up.
Your mom cried when she saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, really great stuff. Over 450,000 families have trusted Legacy Box for their treasured memories. There's never been a better time to digitally preserve your memories. Visit legacybox.com today to get started. Plus, for a limited time, they're offering our listeners an exclusive discount. Go to legacybox.com/crime and get 40% off your first order, or save up to $200 on their largest Legacy Box kit. Just stuff the stuff in. What do you think? Are you really going to spend all that time on your little scanner scanning your little photos?
No, put it in a box.
No, put it in a box. Get it
away.
professionally done. Legacybox.com/crime. Save
Right.
40% today. Start preserving your past.
Now it's time for our favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. On Wednesday, a SWAT team in Birmingham, England made a dramatic entry into a local bank after pedestrians saw through the window bank tellers cowering under their desks. When armed officers got inside, they learned there wasn't a robbery at all. The bank employees were playing a game of hide and seek. Managers say it was all part of a team-building exercise. Although it was a simple misunderstanding, we do wonder why managers thought having tellers in a bank run for cover would be a fun exercise. It was better than their other choice, tying each other up and playing catch with die packs. So here's my question for you, panel. What other childish trouble could these bank tellers get into? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
7 minutes in heaven in the bank vault.
Yes. Toby Ball, what about you? What other childish trouble do you think these bank tellers are going to get into next?
You got to use those bricks to build a playhouse.
Kevin Flynn, what do you think? What other childish trouble these bank tellers likely get into?
First of all, I think this is actually the perfect team building thing because that's how I learned how to count by fives. Watching Schoolhouse Rock. Right? Ready? Go. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 45. Everybody's thinking it now. If you've watched Schoolhouse Rock, that's in your head the rest of the day. I think that these... Toby, you're with me, right?
Yeah, I'm just not going to be able to sleep tonight because of that.
Apple, peaches, pumpkin pie. Who's not ready? Holler out. Okay, get hit, kid. Ready? Go. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. I think what they'll do is they'll probably take Sharpies and block out the Queen's teeth.
Oh, in Birmingham?
Yeah, and all those pound notes.
All right, we should probably end it on that note. Laura Bricker, before we leave for the week, do we have a cat of the week?
We have a dog because I cannot stop watching this video. It is mesmerizing. Michelle Kuller, I'm sorry, I'm botching your name, sent in some videos of Weebles. She says, my husband and I fell in love with this wobbly little lad at a local animal rescue here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We were told she was found stray and brought to a local vet. They ran tests and gave her some steroids, but nothing seemed to help her wobbles. So if you watch the video, it's like, I don't even know. It's like she's like going in every different direction, but she's still running and she's very happy. So they ultimately determined their condition wasn't causing her any pain or problems, and so we named her Weebles. They've had her for 2 years, and she doesn't seem to be in pain, and she's adapted perfectly to her bouncy and wobbly ways. She is 9 pounds of sugar and spunk. And for those wondering what breed she is, we did a doggy DNA test because they are crazy dog people, unlike me, crazy cat person. And it came back as 50% Dachshund, 25% Jack Russell, and 25% two mixed to determine. So maybe that's where the Weebles come from. You got to see the video. The video is hysterical. Oh my God, this little dog is so happy. And it's just like, what is going on? So good for Weebles.
I love you guys, Weebles owners. I'm a dog person too, so I always love a dog of the week. All right, Laura Bricker, people want to send you their heartwarming or other kinds of stories for cat or dog of the week. How can they find you online?
At Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, people want to reach out to you and help you improve your internet connection. How can they find you on Twitter?
That's
We
lost him.
Do your best, Toby, right now. Be like, Toby Ball NH.
Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, if people want to reach
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40,
all right, you are at Kevin P. Flynn, is that right? And if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On. And I encourage you to join the amazing community at our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. You can also join the amazing community on Laura Bricker's Rage Walk Facebook group by becoming a patron at the $6 a month level. Go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. Support the show on Patreon. You can get all kinds of stuff. You can also get a free month of Stitcher Premium if you go to StitcherPremium.com. pleasbabypleas.com/crime and use the code CRIME at checkout. When you do, you'll get access to Married with Podcast, the spin-off show in which Kevin and I dispense all kinds of advice on all kinds of things, including relationships. Our theme song was performed by the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble and used with permission. This show is recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, where we always serve finger foods like cold cuts wrapped in cream cheese. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you
Later.
Can you imagine if like a classic author was able to do like a podcast ad, like these, best-selling New York Times authors
like
able
when
to
they
do?
came out?
Yeah, like imagine if there was like a podcast ad for like a classic book. What would that sound like? Let me throw one at you.
All right.
To Kill a Mockingbird. What would that sound like?
Scout and her little brother are growing up in a fun southern town. They'll learn the meaning of fatherly love and whether a black man can get a fair trial in the South. Read the latest from debut author Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. How about this one? Pip is a young man on the town. He's got great expectations. But don't eat the wedding cake from Mrs. Handlesham.
Not bad. What about Ernest Hemingway?
New from Ernest Hemingway, the feel-good book of the summer, Old Man in the Sea. Follow the old man as he floats out to sea, holding on to a piece of wire strapped to the mouth of a runaway fish. You'll laugh, you'll cry, but will you get all the Christ references? New from one of those Bronte sisters, Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff is a guy with a crazy crush on a lady, and when she rejects him, he goes after her daughter. It's 2 generations of fun.
From Daphne du Maurier, it's Rebecca. She thought she was marrying a nice guy. She didn't know she was also marrying his creepy housekeeper and his dead wife. It's a burning good time. Rebecca from Daphne du Maurier.
From Edith Wharton, Ethan Frome is the book that moves right along. Stay there for the smashing ending.
Ever want to read a book that makes you feel like you're going to be trapped in a cabin forever? How about Walden by Henry David Thoreau, a super boring memoir about a guy who looks at birds, flowers, and dudes cutting ice. Walden, coming from the Transcendentalist Press this fall.
New from Upton Sinclair, The Jungle takes us through the fun world of slaughterhouses. Find out how every part of the cow gets used. New from one-hit wonder author J.D. Salinger. Catcher in the Rye tells the fun story of Holden Caulfield. Everyone's a phony except him. Watch him run around like a dick through New York City only to wind up at a carousel. You'll wonder, what the fuck did I just read?
That's On the Road that you're talking about.
Oh,
Jack Kerouac.
Read this fun book that was written on a typewriter on one endless piece of parchment, because that's how hippies do it.
Do you hate one sister enough to hope that she dies of some disease and hate the other one so much that you want her to marry the wimpy guy? Then Little Women is the book for you. New from Louisa May Alcott. This Christmas.
This Christmas. The Grapes of Wrath. A fun travelogue. Follow the Jode family as they make the fun trip from Oklahoma all the way to California. Hijinks ensue as they run away from the company men with shotguns, keeping them damn Okies from stealing their fruit.
Partners in Crime Media.
Support for this podcast came from Park Row Books, publisher of Under My Skin by New York Times bestselling author Lisa Unger. Under My Skin is an addictive psychological thriller about a woman on the hunt for her husband's killer. Poppy is determined to unravel the mystery around her husband's death. But can she handle the truth about what really happened?
Can she?
Listen to the audiobook for Under My Skin today.
Evelyn and Bobby's women-led intimate companies creates beautiful, purposeful products to make women's lives better. They've created the best underwear ever, combining unique softness with smooth, flat seams that offer a fit so comfortable you'll forget you're wearing them. Evelyn and Bobby comes in 3 silhouettes and 1 size that fits many, with 4-way stretch that moves with you. Visit evelynbobby.com and use the code CRIME to get a free pair of underwear with any purchase. That's a $28 value only when you use the code CRIME. At evelynbobby.com.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.